So we will now be talking about task analysis. A task analysis is basically breaking down a complex procedure into small steps. So you wouldn't necessarily conduct a task analysis for a task that is one step or perhaps even two step. But we're talking about complex behaviors such as vacuuming or tying to somebody's shoelace or brushing teeth, which when you say brushing teeth, that's one behavior, but when you look at it, there are multiple small steps that make up that behavior. So basically, when you list all of those behaviors that are involved in a behavior chain, then when they're put together in a sequential order is called a task analysis. And this is a preliminary step required, essential before you would conduct a teaching procedure such as chaining, be it forward chaining, backward chaining, or total whole task chaining. But this is an essential prerequisite to moving ahead in the direction of teaching a chaining procedure. So one might look at a recipe as a task analysis, which is a task analysis. So if I gave you a recipe to bake cake, and I gave you steps, but I never really confirmed those steps, and I skipped a step such as set the timer for 20 minutes or 25 minutes, it could lead to disastrous results and disappointment. You wouldn't get to eat the cake that you wanted to eat so badly, or at least I do. So the point is to conduct a task analysis in such a precision that you don't end up with far too few steps or far too many, but just enough that each step is essential building step to the next step. And when they're put together, the whole task is performed. So what you want to do is you want to break it down. The way whenever I have done task analysis, I have broken down the task for myself. So if I have to write a task analysis for somebody who has to learn to brush their teeth or to wash their hands or they vacuum or even fold a shirt, I would first write it down, or I would first observe myself doing those steps, because most of these behaviors are something that we all engage in on a daily basis. So it's not difficult to sort of put yourself in the shoes because you are engaging in those behaviors. We're not going to ask for individuals to engage in behaviors such as fix I don't know, fix an engine. Well, in some cases that might be required, and you would go to an expert who fixes engines. So most of the times that at least I have done, these are behaviors that I engage in on a regular basis. So if it is something that is along the lines of hand washing, when I'm washing my hands, because I know I have to develop a task analysis for a particular individual, I'm going to be more mindful of what am I doing. So usually, if I tell my friend, okay, how do you wash your hands? It's going to be, well, you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands, and you come out. But it's not simple as that, right? You go to the bathroom. Depending on the individual, there could be something even as simple as opening the door, which might have to be taught, which isn't an automatic behavior at this point in the repertoire. So opening the bathroom door, turning on the light switch, pulling up sleeves. If they don't pull up the sleeves, they get their sleeves wet. So that's an essential piece that we don't think about, right? Then you go to the sink. You have to mention where is the hand washing going to take place. You turn on the water, place hands under water, you wet hands for 3 seconds. If you skip this stage of wet hands for 3 seconds and you straight go from place hands under water to get the soap, then they're going to just have that sticky soap, but no water and no lather. So you realize how that is an essential step. So if you're not thinking about all those essential small steps that go into that big task, into that complex behavior, you would fail the teaching procedure, because the student will not be successful. It's not going to be naturally tied behavior, small behaviors that make up the change. So place hand under a soap dispenser, press the soap dispenser, and if you have somebody who actually uses bar soaps, then you would have to customize to that. You would have to say, move the bar soap from one hand, scrub it on one hand, scrub it on other hands, and then scrub hands together. So it could be a student who uses both. The upstairs bathroom has a soap dispenser, the downstairs has bar soap. I think initially it would make sense to have just one kind of soap, but eventually you would have to build that in. So it's these small things we don't think of. It's not like I said, it's not as simple as go to the bathroom, get some soap, scrub, rinse, dry, and come out. It's beyond that. So if I wasn't experienced in developing task analysis, I would say washing hands is go to the bathroom, get soap, wash your hands, dry them, and come out. 5 steps. Versus what I'm going to tell you now is pull up sleeves, go to the sink, turn on the water, place hands under water, wet hands for 3 seconds, turn to face the dispenser, pump it with the left hand, get it in your right hand, rub palms together for 3 seconds. If I skip the 3 seconds, then that's a problem. Rub the back of your right hand, rub the back of your left hand, rub, rinse until the soap is gone, under the water, turn the water off, dry hands, close, turn off the light, close the door. That's almost 20 steps. So you can see how if you don't break it down, you would miss a lot of essential steps that go in between, which would further frustrate an individual who already isn't doing so well with this task. If they were performing it so well, we wouldn't be teaching them. We wouldn't be programming it in. It would be a learned skill automatically. So you have to think from the perspective, if you make it too complicated, if you make it too challenging, and they're already struggling, you would face much more behavioral challenges. Versus if you break it down into simple steps, easy steps that they can conquer, that they can accomplish and master, and then you move on to the next target. Um, so when you're designing a task analysis, think about it, what it was like for the first time when you went to drive a car, for the first time you cooked your own meal, or you made a sandwich for the first time. You get the bread, you have to put mayonnaise, you have to put mustard, whatever it is that goes in. And we all are particular about certain order of ingredients that we put in our sandwich. So you want to think about that stuff. Then you want to do a peer test, or a friend test. You take the task analysis and you tell your friend, read it, tell me, what do you think? Does that make sense? Is that how you do it? And you might get a feedback, which might be that, oh, you forgot this step, or yeah, this looks good, or this is too much. Either of those feedback is essential, because you want it to be not too many steps. Stand at the sink for 2 seconds, look in the mirror for 4 seconds. Those would be all unessential, non-essential steps. So you want to get that peer friend test. I recommend getting at least one or two people in the field, and even perhaps outside the field, because sometimes if you have who is part of this field look at it, then they are so used to thinking it from that one perspective, they might not really look at it from the realistic, practical perspective. So having it looked at by somebody who's in the field, and somebody who is outside the field has its advantages. And then after they've reviewed it, you say, now do it the way my list says, do it the way my task analysis says, and have them conducted. You also conduct the actual target using your own steps, and then only you will really see if it is just enough, if it is broken down enough. Because unless you do it, you won't really know where it needs to be tweaked upon. So just simple those things to consider in task analysis. You then have to run a baseline. You will have to first see where they are mastering the skill or where they're not. Because in my washing hands example, you could have somebody who can actually scrub pretty good, who can rinse pretty good. They're just not having the best time getting the soap in their hands. They're not having the best time turning on the water faucet or wetting their hands nicely. So you want to first see, once you have your task analysis, is where in my list are they missing? And so you can either have them just do one by one, or you can have the one step and just assess how they are for that particular step, or you can have them assess across the whole task. Once you get your baseline, then you figure out which kind of chaining procedure you would conduct, and we would be discussing chaining procedures in detail. But just to brief, you could either do forward chaining, backward chaining, or whole task chaining, and make sure you continue on with the task analysis. Don't change these steps in between unless there is a step that is suddenly obsolete. Then let's say the bar soap is no more being used in the house, so you would have to change that step. But you don't want to fiddle with the task analysis just because you feel like it, because you have your baseline and your data coming out of percentage of steps. So that was task analysis. So now we will be talking about chaining. We have discussed task analysis. We've talked about how we can break down a complex behavior into small components of that, small behavioral components that together, when listed in a sequential order, are part of a big behavior chain. So it is just like a chain is, it's just all linked together from beginning to the end. When they are all connected, they form the complex behavior. So a behavior chain, as I said, is a sequence of behaviors that occur in a fixed order. And chaining is a teaching procedure that takes advantage of this broken down small components of the behavior. And what we do is we teach one of those behaviors at at any given time. And we can go in three different directions with that. We can engage in what we call backward chaining, which basically is that you teach the last step first, then you teach the second last step. So you're not teaching in the reverse order. So if I have to give you example of let's say of washing hands that we just discussed in task analysis. So the first step was to open the bathroom door, and the last step was close the bathroom door. The second step was turn on the light, and the second last step was turn off the light. So if I'm going to engage in backward chaining with a particular individual, I would start off by teaching. So I would do all the steps up until the last step. Let's just say that is step number 10. I would teach all the steps. I would prompt through full physical prompt from step 1 to step 9. And when it's time for the 10th step is when I will engage in my discrete trial. I'll give the SD, I'll prompt if I need to for closing the door, and I will deliver my reinforcement for that step. So we're not going in reverse order that I'm going to have them close the door, then open the door. No, but the order remains the same. Backward is only because I'm teaching the last step first. Once they master that last step of closing the door, I'm going to now teach them step number 9, which is to turn off the light. So I'm gonna conduct step 1 through 8, hand over hand, full physical, not even giving them the SD, not even checking to see if they can perform the skill. We go through the motion, we wash the hands, turn out the light, and that's the step I'm working on. That's the step I'm giving the SD for. That's the step I'm giving the reinforcer for. And then I'm going to maintain. If I maintain step number 10, even though I'm not targeting that because that's already been mastered. So once step 10 was mastered, I move to step 9. Once step 9 will be mastered, I'll move to step 8. But I'm not going to go 10, 9, 8 order. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is my target step, and then 9, and then 10. So that would be an example of backward chaining. An example of forward chaining would be which would be what anybody would logically think is we would start with the first step. So in the same hand washing example, I'm going to teach them my target right now is opening the door. So my SD would be open the door. Then the behavior of opening the door, if I need to prompt, I will prompt using whatever prompt that works for that individual. And I would then reinforce opening the door step, and everything else from 2 to 10 would be conducted using full physical, no reinforcer, no expectation. After some time, when step 1 has been mastered, I'll teach step 2 while maintaining step 1, and then step 3 through 10 will be conducted using full physical prompts or whatever prompts we have identified for the individual, and then so on and so forth. So I start with step 1 as my target, step 2, then after that is mastered, I go to step 3. Eventually, all my 10 steps are mastered, and when you put them together, hand washing routine is mastered by the time. Total task is when they, if and wherever they need prompts. So between the 10 steps of washing hands, and I'm only saying 10 steps because just to have an even number to go by. So if there are 10 steps that are needed to wash hands, I'm going to prompt them when needed. So in my baseline that I conducted, I saw that they can open the door, they can turn on the light, but then they just play with the water. But when I put soap in their hands, they can scrub, but they need help with rinsing, they need help with wiping, and they have wiping, drying their hands, but they have no problem turning off the light. But they do have problem closing the door sometimes. They need a little bit of prompt with closing of the door. So what I'm going to then do is I'm going to do with that individual, I'm going to engage in the total task chaining procedure, in which um, I'm going to prompt them for so step one, they don't need any prompt. Step two, they don't need any prompt. So I'm going to let them conduct that step independently. Step three, they need prompt. So I'm going to prompt them verbally. Step four, they don't need prompt. Step five, they need full physical. Step six, they need partial physical. Step seven, they need full physical. Step eight, they need a shadow prompt. Step nine, they need an imitative prompt. And step 10, they need a verbal prompt. So I'm going to prompt them however, whatever steps they need, but we're going to be working on multiple steps at any given time, and there will be steps that they don't need any training because they're at a mastery level for that steps. So that would be your whole task training. So what you need to do is you need to assess which procedure is the best. The research doesn't really point out to any one procedure being better than the other one, but certain individual factors such as the learner. It might be that the learner is going to be more motivated to perform something first thing in the chain, and then they kind of become non-compliant, so it makes sense to then engage in forward chaining. Or it could be that they just love the 10th step is they have something that we can shape up the 10 steps. It's going to be easier for the individuals buy-in if we ask them to perform a skill that is easier to them, and once they understand the system they can progress better. So you would then engage in backward chaining. Or if it is a student who has sort of scattered splinter skills where they can do some, they cannot do some, they're able to imitate better, they're able to do a lot of steps, but they're necessarily not doing it in the same order. So if it's a matter of order, then it would make sense to do a total task chaining because they have a lot of skills in that behavior chain. So once you do your task analysis baseline, you would get a better picture of where exactly is the missing link. Is it happening more step 5, step 6, and everything else is fine? Then it makes sense to do total task, versus there is really no master skill anywhere. So it just makes sense to then do any of the three, whichever is easier. And sometimes you have to decide based on the other caregivers too, what procedure is going to be most likely to be followed and followed with integrity. If you have reason to believe that backward chaining will get implemented incorrectly because some people might confuse it, some people might do in back order, it makes sense to then just do forward chaining or whole. task chaining. So you have to take into account what the treatment agents would be interested in doing and are actually capable of doing. So you want to make sure as you're conducting your chaining procedure, you have your reinforcer, you follow the same reinforcing patterns in terms of immediacy, intensity, and based on accurate behavior. You don't want to inadvertently provide reinforcement for the incorrect step or for a step that already is mastered and doesn't need the highest potent reinforcer. Um, so that was chaining. We've talked about chaining. There are three kinds of chaining procedures: backward chaining, forward chaining, and total task chaining. Any of those procedures are good. Just like as in shaping, they're not quick procedures. They're not going to have always linear path, but they are very useful in teaching complex set of behaviors that involve a lot of broken down steps. We will now be talking about factors that influence that affect a behavior chain. First and foremost, task analysis. If we do not have a complete task analysis, if we omit some steps, then that would severely, drastically impact our task analysis. That's why important to spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of care in developing a task analysis. And it is a time well spent because ultimately that is the crux of how a behavior chain will be successful or not. So you want to make sure that is individualized for each student. It is tempting to use a template. It makes sense to say, okay, I had toothbrushing for another student 2 years ago or 6 months ago. Let me just use that. It it is a likely thing that you would use somebody's template, but you can still assess it, fine comb it, and make sure that it is in fact still addressed and cater to that new student, new client that you have. Because if you just take a template that you found online, that you got borrowed from a friend, that would be detrimental to the progress of that individual, and it isn't even a best practice because you would be wasting your time and their time in engaging in a teaching procedure that isn't customized, individualized to them. So it would make sense to conduct a task analysis thoroughly, individualize it, and then be prepared that there might be down the road challenges that a step is obsolete or a step wasn't broken down enough that would lend to changes. So you can prevent that by engaging in a thorough task analysis, but still be open to knowing that you might have to down the road change some steps or modify some steps in the task analysis. Another factor that would influence a behavior chain, performance of a behavior chain, is length or complexity. If it is a really lengthy chain, if it is a really complex chain, you can imagine, you can expect to run into some challenges. What you might then do is perhaps break them down into two sets of changes, work on the first half of it first, and then